Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. The topic today is top 5 tips for achieving user adoption of SharePoint. Thirty on Thursday is a bi-weekly 30-minute webinar series presented every other Thursday by one of our SharePoint experts or partners. The next webinar will be September 10th, and the topic is Elevate Your Workflows with SAP Integration, and that will be presented by Nintex. For the full schedule, please check out our website, sharepoint.protiviti.com/webinars. Today's session is being recorded, and we also have an archive of past sessions. If you'd like to take a look at previous recordings, please visit sharepoint.protiviti.com/archived webinars. If you have any questions today, please use your question window. We will answer questions at the end. And you may also feel free to tweet us at ProtivitiSP #adoption. Okay, so again, the topic today is top 5 tips for achieving user adoption of SharePoint, and our presenter is Erica Toel with Protiviti, and my name is Angela Grant, and I'll be moderating. So let's get started. I'm going to hand control over to Erica.
Thanks, Angela. Hi, everyone. It's great to have you with us today. So today our topic is the top 5 tips for achieving end-user adoption of SharePoint. My name is Erica Telly. I'm the Strategic Accounts Manager for the West Coast for Protiviti SharePoint. If you have any questions after the webinar, I'm more than happy to meet with you to discuss them. Also, if you have any questions as we go through, please put them in the chat window and Angela will let me know. So our number 5 tip, jumping right in. So the number 5 thing that you should know about end-user adoption of SharePoint is that end-user adoption is the end, it's not the means. How you actually go about achieving end-user adoption is using a discipline and practices from organizational change management. So organizational change management is a practice based on how people change in organizations behaviorally and psychologically. You can actually get a PhD in organizational change management, and there's 60 plus years of research out there on how organizational change management works. I mention this because a lot of times people want to study more about organizational change management after one of these presentations. So this helps you understand what to look for. If you want to be a good leader in an organization, organizational change management is just one of those competencies you should develop, whether you're in the technology field or any business field. So our number 4 tip is that not everyone actually needs to achieve adoption. So here on this chart you'll see we have time along the x-axis and the level of change effort along the y-axis. So adoption and ownership occur over time and with an increasing amount of effort. And there's actually 4 stages, with the 4th stage being adoption and ownership, that people have to go through. And you can't just skip from stage 1 to stage 3. You actually have to go through each of the stages one after the other sequentially in order to get to the adoption level. So the first level is building awareness. So your sponsors, your stakeholders, your end users need to be aware of the project. They need to know the objectives, the timeline, the activities to get there, the goals, and they just need to know that this project even exists. And then next, once they have that awareness, you can start to build a shared understanding of the project. So that means that those people have an understanding of how the change in the project is going to impact them. Now, if you kind of think about this in a real-life scenario, you have to have had some relationship building in the awareness phase to even understand how the change might impact end users. So, for example, if you were rolling out a new approval process for contracts, in the awareness phase, if you could talk through the proposed process and project with the people that would be approving contracts or be affected by it, they might say things like, well, we can't make this change right now because it's our busy time of the year, or we have another project that's changing a lot of things that we're doing, and so it's just too much for us right now. So having that understanding of how the change will impact them is important, and it builds on the awareness phase. The next phase is the shared commitment phase. So once people actually understand how it will impact them, only then can they actually truly support your project and what you're trying to do. If they don't have that shared understanding, then they're giving you a false commitment. They're not really understanding what they're committing to. And then once you get that commitment level, only then can you achieve adoption and ownership, where people actually personally feel responsible and accountable for the project's success, and they've committed their resources, political capital, budget, whatever is needed to the project. Now the thing is, not everyone actually needs to get to that adoption and ownership level. For example, if you're doing that contract approval process, maybe the CEO only sometimes has to approve contracts if they're really large. He might just need to be at the commitment level, whereas the people that manage contracts day-to-day in your procurement organization might actually need to be at that adoption and ownership level. So when people say they want 100% adoption, I kind of question that because, well, first of all, you're probably never going to get to 100% adoption, but second of all, not everyone really needs to be there. Maybe you need to only achieve 70% adoption, 20% shared commitment, and 10% shared understanding. But that kind of leads into our number 3 tip. Be sure to manage your stakeholders. So this is how you understand what level of commitment people really need to get to. You actually can inventory your stakeholders to keep track of them and understand where they are on that curve. So here in an example inventory, this is just a stock inventory we often use. We have the stakeholder group name, we have the individual or the groups of individuals, we have their impact to the project, high, medium, or low. We have their current commitment level, where they are on the change curve there in the previous slide, and then where we want them to be in the future. And then the risk to the project if they don't get to that future commitment level. And what this allows us to do is plan our end user adoption activities appropriately. I'm just going to go back to the previous slide for a visual here. When you're creating your organizational change management plan to achieve end user adoption, you actually can tie the activities to each stage. So for example, if your stakeholder is currently unaware of your project and you want to get them to the awareness level, you could have a one-to-one meeting with them if they're an important stakeholder and walk them through the project, the objectives, the timeline and activities, and then after that meeting they would be at the awareness level. And then maybe the following week or a couple days later, you would do an activity to get to the shared understanding level. Maybe it's another meeting, maybe it's a group meeting with them and their direct reports to fully understand and talk through how the change is going to impact them. And then to get to the shared commitment level, you would do more change management activities and then to the adoption level. It might also take more than one activity in order to get them to the next stage. People aren't robots or computers. It takes them time to process things, to really digest them and think through them, especially if it's important. So it's not always a bad thing that it takes people some time to go through this. So then going back to our number 3 tip about managing our stakeholders, the inventory really helps you track and start to plan out those activities. And then if you didn't have a lot of time to put towards these change management activities, I would say the number 1 thing that you should do is to get off on the right foot and in the building awareness level and use a walking deck with a consistent story. So just have a deck that has this basic agenda and covers this basic agenda, and just use the same story over and over with all of your stakeholders. So what that's going to do is not only is it going to develop a relationship one-on-one with those stakeholders so that later on they feel comfortable coming to you with any hard topics like issues with the project, things that aren't going well, constructive criticism, but it's also going to make it so when they check with each other, with their peers and with other stakeholders, beside the water cooler or in the cafeteria or just in other meetings, they're going to say, oh, hey, Erica came and she told us about her project and here's what she told me. Did she tell you the same thing? And that other person would be able to say, yes, it is a consistent story, and that helps to build trust in your project and, frankly, make it seem like you have it together. So an agenda that really works well, I found, is to just go through the project objectives and make sure the stakeholder agrees with those objectives. Do they think we're going to achieve the potential ROI as it relates to their area of influence? Are there any objectives that we've missed that they think are important? And then talking about the approach and the timeline. So how long it will take, what are key milestones? It helps them understand how it's going to impact their group. Again, if it's a project where it's during their busy season, they'll be able to from the timeline. And it also helps the visual learners. Third, what's the impact to their group and employees? You might not know this yet, so that might actually be the conversation that you have in that point in the agenda. And then number 4, what are your asks and your feedback? So, hey, does this project sound like a good idea? What are your general thoughts and impressions? It's really important that you're involved to make this change happen. And most importantly, ask them to identify a change champion. So again, in this deck, I'm trying to really review the things that if you were going to do the bare minimum on a project, these are the important things you want to cover. And so that brings us to our number 2 point, use change champions. So change champions are a group of people where each person is a representative of one of your stakeholder groups. So they're the go-to person in that stakeholder group that can really help you on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis understand how the decisions you're making in your project ongoing are going to impact their group. So for example, in a smaller organization, you might have one representative from finance, one from HR, one from sales. They don't have to be a senior person. In fact, oftentimes it's best if they're not, because then they have the time to participate fully in the initiative. Other characteristics, there's someone that is trusted by the members of their group. They're usually somebody, in the case of SharePoint, that has some aptitude for technology or just has an interest in making things work better in their group. Although an interest in technology isn't necessarily a requirement. In fact, sometimes it's good to have 1 or 2 change champions that aren't the most technology savvy, just so you can get some good feedback from that perspective. But most importantly, they're going to have owner-level commitment to the change. So they're going to be the people that you're running decisions by, that are the first to try out the new functionality and pilot it. They're going to be the people that can identify and manage resistance to change. So you want to basically build them as the trusted advisor for their group in relation to your project. So if someone in their group has a concern, they can go to that person because they're seeing them in their day-to-day work and just say, oh, hey, it wasn't really clear to me what this means, or I don't really think that's going to work for us and here's why. And then your change champion can bring that to your weekly VT meetings or however you engage them ongoing so that you've heard that concern early on and can address it before it starts to majorly impact your project. They're also oftentimes known as a super user, a power user. There's tons of names for these change champions, but their job still remains the same. So then our number one tip is if you build it, they will not necessarily come. So you can do all of the user adoption in the world, but if you haven't built a great user experience, then it's not really going to matter. So it's important I always ask people in the discovery phase, okay, who's going to go to your site or your solution and how are they going to use it? And then those become your personas, and then what they are going to do become your user scenarios and stories. And then once you have that defined, it's really easy to understand, okay, in order to provide the best experience for that user story for this person, then these are the combinations of SharePoint features that I should use in order to make that happen. And then, concentrating on making sure the visual design is appropriate, whether you're using out of the box or not. You can just making sure that, like if you were using out of the box SharePoint, that in your document library, your column names are friendly and make sense, that the descriptions are filled out. Just the little things that you can do to make it a better user experience. Making sure your information and architecture and your metadata makes sense, which really is informed by those user scenarios and personas. Net, if you don't have a great user experience, then none of this other stuff's going to matter. Just as important is choosing the right project. So making sure that when you look across all the potential projects that your team could be doing, that you're choosing, number one, low-hanging fruit, things that are maybe seem small to you but would make a big impact to the user. I can't tell you how many times people have been keeping track of things in an Excel sheet and just say, oh, hey, did you know that you could use a list for this so that multiple people could be changing rows at the same time? And that just blows their mind. And sometimes as SharePoint practitioners, we forget that simple things like document management, check-in, check-out, lists, metadata can really make a big impact for people. And then looking at the projects that could have the highest ROI. Sometimes an ROI is a ratio, right? So sometimes those little projects like putting an Excel sheet in a list, it's going to save someone hours of time or multiple people hours of time. And since it would take you so little cost to build it, there's a high ROI there. Whereas some of the bigger projects where, it's a multi-month effort, maybe there's an ROI there, but it's not as much. It just really depends. Also, other considerations for the right project are your stakeholders. Do they have time to be involved? Do they care? Are they excited about it? If it's one of your first projects, are they willing to take on the risk of innovation while you kind of figure this out? And also the right timing. So many times, people say, I need to get this project done right now, but it turns out the stakeholder groups or the people that will be impacted by the change have a lot of other change initiatives going on, or it's a busy time of year for them, and there's no way that the project's going to be successful, and so you might as well just wait to do it. And then finally, share your success. So make sure when someone sends you an email and says, hey, it seemed really small, but now that our Excel sheet is in a list, it's really helping us. Save that email in an archive somewhere It'll help you not only when you're trying to get new projects or convince stakeholders to do a project, it'll also help you come review time when you need to justify the budget for your group or ask for additional budget. Just making sure you document those key wins helps you in so many ways. And then promote those success stories. So let's say that you put in that contract approval workflow. Well, I bet that there's other areas in your business that could use an approval workflow. Maybe it's not contracts, maybe it's marketing collateral or financial documents. But being able to show them how an approval workflow worked for another department and could work for them will help them really visualize why they should be taking the time to do this project and why it's important to them. And that ties right in with finding groups with similar business needs. So in summary, think about organizational change management as the means to achieve adoption. Remember that there's 4 stages that you have to go through before you can get to the adoption ownership level. Those stages are to build awareness, create a shared understanding, build commitment, and then get to adoption ownership. Then make sure that you're making a list of all your stakeholders, that you're understanding where they are currently and where they need to be so you can plan your adoption activities appropriately. If you don't do anything else with those stakeholders, just take the time to build that one-on-one relationship by having the meeting with the walking deck and also get their feedback right from the beginning of the project. You know, oftentimes just doing that, they're like, okay, yeah, check in with me once in a while. Whereas if I had just sent them an email or something, they would have never given me the time ongoing. Then next, please build a change champion program. Even if it's informal, maybe it's a monthly user group. Like if SharePoint in your organization is much more casual and is not so project-based, is more ad hoc, do a monthly user group where people can share their success stories. Maybe have someone come in once a month, talk about something they built for their group and how it worked and how other people can do that in their group. That's a way to combine the sharing the success with the change champion strategy. And then finally, just remember there's other things than just building it that have to be considered, like the great user experience, choosing the right projects, and sharing those success stories. So with that, those are the 5 tips for achieving end-user adoption. Here's my contact information. I'm also on Twitter at Erica Telly. And I'm always living to geek out on this subject, so please don't hesitate to reach out to me. There's a bunch more resources that you can't share in a 30-minute presentation. So if you have a specific question, there's probably something I can send to you. If there's any questions, chat.
Erica, I don't see any questions right now. Everyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit those into the question window. We have another minute or 2 left over that we could answer those questions for you. Okay, Erica, I do see one question. Someone is asking if you have any kind of, what is this, a spreadsheet or a user adoption checklist that you could share out? And if not, would it be possible to get a copy of the slides?
Yeah, so we can certainly give you a copy of these slides. I think we could probably send out a link in the recap. And then also, Angela, is it okay if I give you some other links? It's not exactly a checklist. It's a very expanded version of this process. So it maps user adoption activities to a project methodology, a standard project methodology of, define, design, etc. And what user adoption activities should be included at each phase. And then it also has sample deliverable templates to correspond with those activities. So I'm happy to share that as well.
Okay, that sounds great. So everyone, you can expect a follow-up note from me. I'll go ahead and send out a copy of the slides and also the links and samples that Erica just mentioned. And if we don't have any more questions, then that's all we have for you today, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Erica.
Thank you.